Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for coming along. For those of you who don't know me, my name's David Alvis, and I am one of two lead technologists for the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Innovation Platform with the TSB. One thing I think I probably ought to add at this point is that Tom Jenkins here, who's chairing this morning's session, will from March be joining the TSB as a third technologist. For over an interim period while I wind down my involvement. So Tom and Callum will eventually be the main staff. So Tom's a very important, much more important person in terms of TSB's future or the SAF-IP future than possibly I am. But given that I've been involved in the drawing up of this competition in conjunction with Callum, my colleague, it's probably the more appropriate that I give you this run through. So just a very quick show of hands. How many people in the room have had previous experience of working with the TSB or involvement with TSB competitions? Quite a few. Okay, so that will help. We are fairly tight. You should have in front of you the briefing document. So a lot of what I'm going to say, or pretty much everything that I'm going to say is in here. And there will be questions and answers afterwards. So if there's anything, any sort of burning issues, if you could just keep them to the end. This competition has been quite a long time in sort of gestation because it has been trying to define what the most appropriate way of doing it. It started life essentially as all the thoughts were around looking at phenotyping technologies, particularly to look at how we better exploit the proliferation in genomics and genomic data. And trying to measure and predict phenotypic expression was a real challenge and a rate-limiting step. For the successful exploitation of the huge investment globally in genomics and other omics technology. But we decided that was rather sort of a rather limited scope, and we decided to extend it or broaden this one further to the whole range of measurement within agri-food systems. Working on the premise that what gets measured gets managed. We want to encourage the development of technologies that will improve key production and quality traits, better understanding and application of genomic information, obviously, but also better management decision making in the field. And when we say in the field, that's in its broadest sense of actually in commercial application is probably a more appropriate term. Looking at driving productivity gains, cost and waste reduction, improved product quality, reducing environmental impact and improving animal welfare, and also sort of with a view that there is a massive global market for these products and services. This is not something that is limited to the UK, and certainly the TSB's view is whilst the SAF-IP has a focus on driving UK agricultural productivity, we're also interested in exploitation of UK knowledge and UK business for global market. So what sort of things are we looking at within the plant sector? Looking at technologies for measuring root crop and crop canopy development, nutrient water use efficiency, disease and stress tolerance and resistance traits, yield quality prediction under differing environment and management systems, and looking at how can we optimize commercial versus biological yield. So whatever technological opportunities exist for that, if we can adapt those for commercial exploitation and commercial use, then great. And similarly for the livestock sector, which is, I think, for this audience today, there's probably more focus, looking at things about identifying traits for fertility and fecundity, and also increasingly important neonatal survivability. Feed conversion efficiency, probably one of the most important ones within livestock systems, trying to measure that objectively. Carcass or milk quality measurement and optimization, identifying disease resistance, and so the list goes on. I mean, I don't need to sort of read them all out to you, but anything that falls within this list, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but anything that will help measure traits or improve management of livestock production systems to drive improvements in productivity and reduction in waste would be within scope. And then downstream of primary production, looking at tolerance, pest and disease tolerance in store, ripening characteristics, shelf life, maturation and quality, etc., food safety issues. And then possibly as important is looking at linking information throughout supply chains. So whilst the exploitation of genomics, phenotyping is important, it's being able to capture that and process that information, and also the development of the bioinformatic capacity or capability behind that to process and interpret the data, and to standardise phenotypic data sets so that we can use commercially gathered information in a valid and robust way to ultimately to drive better decision making at farm management and at animal and plant breeding level. So I hope that makes sense. Just a couple of points, and this is sort of lifted from a presentation that Chris Walker at the Bioscience KTN gave a little while ago. I mean, some traits are easy to measure. I mean, obviously there's going to be a pair of bathroom scales that do the job. But equally, there are those that are probably harder to measure, more expensive to measure, and they're the ones where the real value lies. So as you move down that list, the complexity and the difficulty in measuring these traits increases, but the opportunity for commercial exploitation grows with it. So obviously, it is the TSB competition is about looking at developing technologies that will do things that aren't currently available or are difficult to do at the moment. So that's a very, very brief run through, which I've done in about 5 minutes. So pretty much all of that is in the document in front of you. If you have any questions, if you've burning questions on that now, please stick your hand up, and if not, we'll go on to probably what's going to take a little bit longer, which is going through the rules and regulations and how to apply. Otherwise, we can wait till afterwards. But just one thing I would like to stress is that, and this was a point that was brought up in the last workshop, the projects that we're looking to fund do not have to be related back to genomics and phenotyping. That was where this whole competition came from, but we have broadened it out to the broader aspect of measurement technologies and anything with a commercial application within the agri-food sector involving measurement and sensing. Okay, so moving on. So for those of you who've been involved with the TSB before, you will know an awful lot of this, but there are some key changes that will apply to TSB competitions going forward, so you can't switch off entirely. First of all, for those of you who are TSB virgins, so to speak, a very positive history of the TSB. Technology Strategy Board's a government agency that was spun out of the DTI in 2007 with a view to helping business improve the rate at which UK scientific R&D output is turned into something of commercial value and exploitable for the benefit of the UK economy, generate wealth and enhance quality of life. An innovation platform, which is basically, which is one of them, there are a number of these that operate within the TSB, is a programme of investment to assist UK businesses to grow through those opportunities created by government action to address key societal challenges. So rather than saying, right, okay, there are X number of businesses in the UK, let's sort of chuck some money at them, we're targeting key societal challenges, and for us, sustainable agriculture and food production is the focus for the platform that Callum and myself, and soon to be joined by Tom, operate. An innovation platform requires a clearly articulated and quantified societal challenge. So in our case, it's sustainable food production for a growing world population against this backdrop of climate change and diminishing resource availability. There needs to be government action to address that. Technology has to be part of the solution. There needs to be opportunities for UK business, so there needs to be a business capability within the UK to address that and capitalise on it. And there needs to be added value through Technology Strategy Board involvement. So basically the strategic criteria, looking at it in another way, is does the UK have the capability? And clearly within agri-food it does, and also within the photonics and some measurement it does. So this is something that sits very comfortably within the scope. Is the idea ready? Is there a clear opportunity to which this is a timely response? Again, yes. And looking at like I said, the proliferation of genomics and also the development of measurement and sensing technologies, there's a great opportunity to bring these things together. And can we speed progress towards a more sustainable economic growth? And yes, by bringing these two these two technologies, these two areas together, there is a genuine opportunity here to drive economic growth, both for the UK agri-food sector and also for the technology providers feeding into it. Is there a large market opportunity? Well, certainly in this case there's a massive market opportunity globally, because the technologies that we're talking about, trait measurement or decision support, will have applications not just in the UK but across the world. And can the TSB make a difference? Can we add value? Will our investment promote sustainability and quality of life? We need to make sure to stay on the right side, at least of European competition law, that what we are doing is basically helping something happen that would either not happen otherwise or will happen quicker, faster, and add value, rather than simply be seen as crowding out private sector investment and therefore being a subsidy for business. So the key dates for this competition, there are two aspects to it. First of all, everything opens on the 18th of March. Okay, so you've got approximately 7 or 8 weeks before the competition is open for expressions of interest. The collaborative R&D side of which is a 2-stage competition, the first stage of which is submission of an expression of interest. That closes on the 1st of May. And then what? Stage 2 will open for those CR&D applicants that we want to invite forward to the second full stage application. And the feasibility study element of this, which is a single stage application, will be notified by the 28th of June. So the second stage of CR&D will open, but that will be, like I said, by invitation only on the 20th of May. The single stage feasibility studies will be notified by June the 28th. And finally, the final CR&D outcomes, the main collaborative R&D, he's coming in the way. CR&D notification will be on the 29th of July. In terms of the application structure, it's broken down into, for CR&D side, certainly it's broken down into 4 main sections. Does the project or the application fit within the competition call? I mean, that's the killer, basically. If you can't get through that one, then that's simply a case of reading the exam question. Does your application fit? What's the business proposition, and what's the applicant trying to address and exploit? What will the project involve? Who are the participants? What are their credentials? Is it a valid consortium? And then what's the potential outcome? Is the project value for money? And why should the TSB be getting involved in it? So those are the key questions that need to be answered in that application. All these applications are assessed independently. We don't, Callum, myself, Tom, will not be involved in the assessment of them. We will be involved in the appointment of assessors, but those assessors are independents who are engaged by the TSB on the basis of their knowledge and expertise as individuals rather than as representatives of the companies or organisations they might work for. And they will be instructed to score these competitions against set parameters, looking for clear and concise answers, the right amount of information, but clearly quantification and justification for what they're doing. So what we don't want to see in applications is this idea of, start here, then a miracle occurs, and then the outcome that we're looking to see is here. Now, we are in the business of funding of higher risk projects, but there needs to be a little bit more than that, particularly in the full stage application, but even in the expression of interest, you need to clearly articulate how you intend to go about doing it. So just to go back in a bit more detail, so the gateway review process, the killer key question is, does the application pass the scope gateway question? And the scope is clearly identified within the briefing document and within the guidance for applications or for applicants. If the answer to that is no, then it goes no further. So, as in all these things, read the question and make sure that what you're doing fits within that. We've tried to make the scope as broad and inclusive as possible, but you can write yourself out of this very, very easily, so just be careful. If the answer to that is yes, it's within scope, then we go to the review process. So, in terms of what's eligible and in terms of an application, for all these collaborative R&D, for all TSB competitions, the project must be business-led. It must be for collaborative R&D, and there's a clue in the name, it needs to be a collaboration, so there needs to be more than one partner, and the lead partner must be a commercial business. Businesses may receive up to 50% of their project costs. If you're an SME, that figure rises to 60%, but the total project funding typically will be 50%, will be a total of 50%. Higher education institutes or RTOs may receive 100% of their costs based on the FEC, full economic costings, through the GES system. But the key change this year with TSB projects and with this one going forward is that before there were no restrictions on, realistically, on what, or fewer restrictions on how that money could be apportioned within the project, up to the 50% total project funding. Now at least 70% of all project costs must be incurred by business partners within that collaboration, and therefore obviously the flip side is no more than 30% of total project costs can be incurred by academic partners. The project will typically last, or this is the CR&D project, will typically last for 3 years, although given that what we're talking about here may involve plant and animal breeding programs, which typically, because of the seasonal and generation interval issues, may take longer. We will consider projects lasting up to 5 years, but we would like you to speak to us about that before you submit the application if you've got a longer term, a project that's likely to last more than 3. And we're looking at projects that would typically be, or the grant claim would typically be in the £500,000 to £1.5 million value range. The other half of the other part of the competition is the feasibility study element. This is a single stage process. Again, they need to be collaborative, but these are shorter projects looking at basically need to be industry led, but looking at establishment of whether or not a concept is feasible and will stand further investment or development by business. Within these feasibility studies, again, there's around about 500,000 in total going for feasibility, available for feasibility studies. We can fund up to 65% of the cost, or 75% for SMEs, and again, the same rules apply for academic institutes or research organisations, again based on the GES system, but also the rule now that 70% of the project cost must be incurred by the business partner does apply, and that's the key change this year. The feasibility studies are maximum duration of 12 months, and typical range of project value there for 25 to 100,000 pounds. So that's a separate sort of tranche of money within the whole within the project within this call for feasibility studies, and that's a single stage application process. So one application, no invitation to a second round. In terms of what's eligible, again, you can read that yourselves. All this information is in guidance for applicants, which will be available to download once you register for the competition. But labour costs, overheads, materials, etc., new capital equipment, depreciation on existing capital, subject to the guidelines that are in a rather sort of lengthy but document that does need to be read. In terms of overheads, what is and isn't eligible, I mean, a lot of it is makes fairly common sense, really, in terms of what you can and what you can't do. Typically, this is about funding R&D, so production services, anything that involves your regular day job doesn't qualify for funding. And also things like entertainment and hospitality, IP protection costs, or anything that you would normally do would not be eligible under this. VAT obviously is excluded, interest charges, bad debt provision, etc., etc. So all this sort of stuff sits outside the eligibility of the project. So just be aware of that when you're doing your cost. No. In terms of the eligible costs for academic partners, they're based on full economic costing calculations. Now, you guys probably understand, or those of you involved in from academia will understand this better than I do. The research paid for by the research councils. The contribution is a total eligible cost for academic partners, and therefore the 20% differential between total cost and full economic costing does not represent the contribution on the part of the partner. So it shouldn't be included as part of the collaboration contribution cost. Probably one of the most important things with all of this is collaboration agreements. That one of the things that we need to see before we will fund a project is that the consortium involved has a robust and workable collaboration agreement based on how they're going to work and how any IP arising from the outputs of the project will be divvied up and will be managed or owned. So the word of warning here is anybody who hasn't done this before or are looking at working with particularly larger organisations, you need to start working on this sooner rather than later, because there's nothing that large corporations and their lawyers like more than stringing these things out. So don't leave this to the last minute. This is something that needs to be done, needs to be signed off before we will agree to fund, or certainly before we'll release a grant confirmation letter and release funding. So start working on this when you start scoping your project out. Don't leave it until you get a grant offer letter before you start thinking about putting that together, because it invariably takes a lot longer than you think. Projects will be assessed based on the strength of their business proposition. So that's something, again, if you've not worked with the TSB before, this is an organisation that is where we're looking to drive commercially exploitable solutions to the challenges that we're putting in place, and therefore it's the strength of the business proposition is key here, and their value, ultimately their value for money. We're providing grants based on like I said before, on projects that would be probably too risky for business to fund on their own, but they need to represent a decent payback in terms of return on investment for the public purse. The way the TSB operates is probably analogous, you want to argue, to private equity, in that we will work on a portfolio basis. We'll fund a number of projects. We know that some of them are going to fail, because if they don't, we're not taking enough risks, or we're not funding the right things. We know some of them will probably break even, and we know some of them hopefully will go absolutely ballistic in terms of revenue generation. What we don't know at the outset is which ones are going to be those star performers and which ones are going to be the dogs. Therefore, we need to have an idea of value for money, but ultimately, as long as the portfolio pays back, then over time, then we're probably just about hitting the nail on the head. But we need to see a strong evidence of business proposition within any application. So where do you go to for help? Or in a minute, we're going to have a presentation from David talking about what makes a good application for these for TSB competitions. The KTNs, both the Biosciences KTN and the EFP KTN in this case, are here to help you put your proposal together if you feel you need guidance. And one thing I would stress, having worked through a number of these calls now, is that the success rate and the hit rate of those consortia that work with the KTNs tends to be considerably higher than those that don't. So they are here to help, and I would advise people to take advantage of that. Any other details, we'll have a Q&A session in a minute after David's talk. If there are any specific questions, please ask them. There's a competitions hotline and online data through the Innovate UK, which is a TSB website. And like I said, when you register for the competition, when the competition opens on the 18th of March, if you register your interest, you will get the application forms, but also the guidance for applicants. It's a fairly meaty tome, so I suggest that everybody reads it, or get somebody within the consortium to read it from cover to cover, because pretty much every question you are likely to want to ask will be covered within it. And there's nothing more irritating than having to remind people that actually the questions they're asking would have been answered if they bothered to read that. So I hope that makes sense. Like I said, David will be up in a sec to talk about putting projects together. We'll then have a Q&A afterwards. All I would say is good luck with this one. We've been very encouraged by the turnout today and in Cambridge earlier in the week. we think this competition has a huge opportunity for the sector, and really looking forward to seeing what people bring forward. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.